for watching. Today I'd like to discuss the novel The Man Without Qualities, written by Austrian author Robert Musil about 90 years ago, but I'd like to show why it's still relevant for us to read today. I first read this book about 6 or 7 years ago, and I read it through fairly quickly, concentrating on the story and getting to know the characters, but I realised that this was a novel of ideas and that I'd have to revisit it. So I undertook a second reading and read it through much more slowly, reading just 1 or 2 chapters at a time and reading other things in between. But again, I realised I'd be up for rereading. Such was the quality of thought in this novel. On my third reading now, and I'm reading from a different translation, the original English version by Kaiser and Wilkins, and it's as though the first 2 readings, someone else must have read the book. I've just missed so much. There's so much rich thought in there that a rereading, revisit is a must. And I think of the Hungarian author Miklos Szentkuthi. He had a library of about 100,000 books, nearly all of them read and well annotated, yet he claims, sadly, that only a small percentage of them really excited him. I've got hundreds of novels here and read many more over the years, but I can also say there's only 5 or 6 that I must reread. And The Man Without Qualities is definitely one of those, truly a desert island novel. I think of Jonathan Lethem in his introduction to the Picador Classic reissue of The Man Without Qualities. In this introduction, he says he's met too few people who have read The Man Without Qualities, but of those he has met, many have read them twice. It induces obsession. I don't think we should be put off by a novel of ideas. In this day of popular novels and blockbuster films, we shouldn't see a novel of ideas as presumptuous or threatening, but we should get involved and take it as a challenge, perhaps. There's other novels of ideas written in the 20th century. There's Prey by Miklos Szentkuthi, the Hungarian author I referred to earlier. There's Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, or Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert M. Pirsig, and there's others. Now, the way Musil writes the book is using a framework of what he calls essayism. He has the narrative as a framework, as an armature, and off that framework he hangs off the ideas he wants to explore. And this is what he calls essayism. And it's not just a way of writing, he says, but it's also a way of living. And in a future planned essay, I'd like to flesh this out a bit more because it comes into play in Book 3 of The Man Without Qualities. So, bearing in mind the title of Kaiser Wilkins' version, the second book, The Like of It Now Happens, I'd like to call this present essay The Like of It Still Happens, because I believe that Musil's thoughts concerning Austria in the 1930s, with all the challenges they faced in politics and with progressing technology, it's also relevant for us today, because how much more so has technology progressed, and there's still political issues facing us. So what I'd like to do is delve into the book and pull out a few examples so that you might take interest in reading this book. So my first selection is from chapter 44, referencing one of the main characters, Diotima. When she spoke of symbols earlier in the meeting, she had naturally meant not soup kitchens, but that nothing less was at stake than the need to recover that unity of mankind that had been lost because the disparity of interests in society had grown so great. The question arises whether at the present time the peoples of today are still at all capable of such great unifying ideas. Then also in chapter 49, Diotima again, do we have anything at all nowadays that we can regard as truly important and great, something worth working for with all our might? Similar thoughts also found in chapter 66. Now, Diotima was in charge of a group called the Collateral Campaign, and this group was charged with finding a great cause with which Austria could celebrate the upcoming anniversary for the reign of the Emperor Franz Joseph. As the novel progresses, we see that this great cause is not going to be found, such as the dissension of the views within the group and within wider society. Man Without Qualities is set in 1913 and 1914. and soon this great cause would come, and the people would throw themselves headlong into the horrors of a great war. Their great cause had come. I'd like to read from Miklos Bantfi's novel, The Transylvanian Trilogy. It's set in the years leading up to the First World War from the Hungarian standpoint. Just reading from the last chapter, the main protagonist is driving to the train station in rural Hungary, and this is what he sees. From time to time, the throng was so thick that the car had to be stopped. Everyone on the road was a reservist who had been called to the colours. They were mostly in groups of between 50 and 60 men, but sometimes they were much larger, perhaps of more than 100. They had marched in military fashion. "Hurrah for the war," they cried, "hurrah for the war." They all felt full of courage and were gay and confident. Only the women sobbed quietly and dabbed at their eyes. In Stefan Zweig's autobiography called The World of Yesterday, we can see similar scenes detailed in Austria. Later on in the novel, Musil mentions a young lady called Gerda, and he says of her that she was one of those charmingly purposeful young women of our time who would instantly become bus drivers if some higher purpose called for it. Young people in particular have the drive and energy to devote themselves to a great cause. So we need to offer them something good and great, not something evil and great. There's so many voices out there, so many opinions, and so many ways to listen to them. Wouldn't it be great to have an overarching worldview that could unite us all, as individuals, as families, as society, and that would embrace all races, genders, and ages? I think of that cat poster saying, "If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything." In the 1930s, when Musil wrote The Man Without Qualities, Germany was again searching for that great cause, and what they were offered was yet another world war, which they threw themselves into headlong. So let's read an excerpt from chapter 48. Musil says, "On this road, however, business leads directly to philosophy, for nowadays only criminals dare to harm others without philosophy. Only criminals dare to harm others without philosophy." You can see this need for self-justification in the world about us, whether it's the 4-year-old caught in the pantry or the politician trying to excuse his behaviour by referring to the big picture. St. Augustine spoke about the lust of self-justification, and it's in evidence in any road rage incident you've ever witnessed. As long as love of money is the root of all evil, there'll always be propaganda, people trying to explain away what they do. And it might be in the commercial realm or the political realm, but there will always be propaganda with us in different guises. So let's also have a read out of chapter 50. Here we see Arnheim speaking, and it says, "To a circle of active professionals, he expounded Hölderlin saying that there were no longer human beings in Germany, but only professionals." And over in chapter 54, "And at no time has the difference between the expert's experience and that of the layman been as great as it is now. Everyone can see this in the ability of a masseur or a pianist." And in chapter 63, Musil also speaks about hyper-specialisation. There's jobs so specialised they never need be advertised, because there's only 2 or 3 people in the country that could ever be qualified. Later on in his novel, Musil explains that this hyper-specialisation can lead to frustration and disenfranchisement. People say to themselves, "Look, no one ever asked me for my opinion. I don't have great knowledge, no special qualifications." And so they think, "Well, what do I know about?" Well, I have opinions. I have opinions about other people, and I'll express them if I like. I'll express my opinion about my friends, my family, celebrities. And so they go online and express their opinions. And if that frustration keeps going, that opinion can lead to trolling and bullying. Also in chapter 54, we'll read this bit together. This refers to the progress in technologies. "The theory of relativity, Bohr's atomic theory, autogeneous welding, the flora of the Himalayas, psychoanalysis, individual psychology, experimental psychology, physiological psychology, social psychology, and all the other achievements that prevent a time so greatly enriched by them from turning out good, wholesome, integral human beings. School teachers know that education may only turn out smart devils, not clever angels. What Musil is saying is that no increase in technology has ever enhanced human moral integrity. Another excerpt, still in chapter 54. This is the main character, Ulrich, speaking. What one needs in life is merely the conviction that one's business is doing better than one's neighbour's. It's like accumulating runs in the game of cricket. The runs themselves aren't intrinsically valuable, but the idea is to get more of them than your competitors. Let's go over to chapter 55. Musil says, "But for the modern soul, which playfully spans oceans and continents, nothing is as impossible as finding its way to souls who live just around the corner. Technology has allowed us to travel around the globe in hours, but we still have trouble getting to know our neighbours." My last selection, over in chapter 87 on the same theme, behind everything or creature, when it tries to get really close to another, is a rubber band pulling. Every movement is reined in by a rubber band that won't let a person do quite what he wants, as though we're all attached to horizontal bungees. And you've felt it yourself. You've tried to get closer to another person, but something pulls you back. You've also felt that happening in the other person sometimes. They try to get close to you, but something pulls them back. Musil says, why is that? In an age of loneliness, why do we experience that recoil? So I'd like to leave it there for the moment, but there's plenty of other excerpts I could have chosen, and hopefully I've stimulated you to want to read this amazing novel. My next planned essay, I'd like to discuss humour, irony and metaphor in The Man Without Qualities.